Hey everyone, I'm Saeed, the Codogrammer, and if you happen to be an existing subscriber, then apologies for my 3-month hiatus, but I am back. I've had a lot of stuff going on, which I can talk about in another video if anyone's interested. But in today's video, I'll take a quick look at GitHub CoPilot Chat, which I managed to get access to. So if you don't know what that is, well, it's a lot like ChatGPT, but specialized for coding tasks and embedded right inside your IDE. That's the chat part of Copilot, which we will discuss in this video. But Copilot from GitHub already existed and is basically code completion powered by AI/machine learning. I've made videos on Copilot on this channel before, so you can check those out if you want to know more about Copilot in general. So before we dive into some details, let's take a quick look at what Copilot Chat looks like in action.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Three, two, one.
Here we go!
All right, so how do you get your hands on Copilot Chat? Well, it's currently in limited public preview. You sign up to the waitlist. I'll include a link below and you'll get notified when it's available to you. And to do that, you need to head over to Copilot X. There's a bunch of things there that you can sign up for. No harm in getting on the waitlist for all of them. Now, the X in Copilot X just acts as a placeholder. So you can have Copilot for security, Copilot for PRs, Copilot for XYZ. So you can see new Copilot projects under this heading. So just to reiterate, Copilot X is not a specific product. It's a kind of generic term where the X is substituted for different products that may come down the line in future. Now, one major gotcha, sadly, is that to use Copilot Chat, you need a paid Copilot subscription, which at the time of recording is $10 a month or $100 a year. You can see that stipulation mentioned just here. So how do you set up Copilot Chat? Well, once you're signed up, eventually you should hopefully get an email that looks something like this. Just follow the instructions there. But essentially, I needed VS Code Insiders. I think that requirement isn't there now. So if you're getting this now, I think you can just use VS Code or Visual Studio and just follow the appropriate instructions. But essentially, you need the Copilot extension. Again, I needed the nightly build. You should just use probably whatever the latest version is available. It's super easy to set up. You then need to sign into your Copilot account, and then you should see a chat icon that looks something like this. And away you go. All right, so sometimes when I'm looking at something new, I like to think, what is it and what is it not? Okay, so let's start with what it's not. So let's ask a broad question that you might ask ChatGPT. All right, and as you can see from the response, I'm sorry, but as an AI programming assistant, I cannot engage in discussions about life, existence, philosophy, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, it's a programming tool, and that's what really differentiates it from ChatGPT. A lot more work can go into this tool to focus it on programming, whereas ChatGPT has a much broader focus. All right, so to get started with actual programming stuff, I have a class here called Maze Solver. Don't really worry about the details about what this code is doing, but essentially it's kind of like a silly maze solving game. It was actually some code I had generated from ChatGPT earlier. And we're going to use this to ask Copilot Chat questions about this. But before we do that, let's get a little bit familiar with the controls and execute some examples of queries we might do. So we could say generate a function to add two numbers together. Okay, and as you can see, it's generated some code and it's given a couple of different examples. Now, let's say we wanted to use this piece of code. You've got the option to copy it to your clipboard. You can insert it at your cursor. So if I just select that, you can see that it gets inserted there. We don't want that, so I'll just undo that. And you've got a couple of other options here. So if you've got a terminal command, you can just execute that straight away in your terminal. All right, so the next thing you can do is you can type / and then you get a bunch of topics that come up and you can use these as shortcuts to do various things. So I can just hit explain and hit enter and it would start trying to explain the code. Yeah, you can see it's going into some detail. I don't really care at this stage, but it's more just to show you the kind of stuff that you can do. And then the other thing that you can do is you can be actually in the editor pane itself, and you could go here, for example, and press Command I. That shortcut might vary depending on your operating system. And again, you can type / here to get these kind of topics that you can select, like fix, test, etc. Or you could just ask a question or a regular prompt. Oh, that's a bit disappointing. Okay. Yeah, okay, so there you go. You've got an example of some responses here. Doesn't really tell us a huge amount, and you can move this to the chat window. Let's ask another question. Okay. All right. So it gives you a bit of information there. Personally, I find it easier to keep the chat here and to not use this window here. I just find that it gets in the way. All right. So now let's go ahead and ask some questions about this code. Yeah, it gives us some information and also talks about ways that we could improve this code. So let's say, can you generate a unit test for this code using, say, JUnit 5, the bane of software developers? Okay, that's pretty good. So let's say insert into a new file. Okay, yeah, here we have our test. So I'm not going to go into detail about whether this works. I'm pretty sure it's probably fairly accurate. I've done lots of tests on some of this AI stuff before, but it just shows you how easy it is to get at least your initial piece of code up and running without having to resort to Stack Overflow or writing these things manually. So let's just try another example. Let's say, can you generate a test using Spock? Wow, look at that. And let's create a new file for that. Okay, and then here, if you happen to be using Spock, you can see that this has generated Spock tests for your code. All right, let's just try getting a bit more test coverage. So can you create some test cases for edge cases? Yeah, there you have it. And we probably, again, don't need to go into this in a lot of detail, but it just shows you the speed with which you can generate this kind of stuff. And again, you could do most of this stuff with ChatGPT as well, but this is more specialized and it's right there in your IDE, no copying and pasting from a separate window. And as I said, you could do, for example, here, if you were slightly confused, you could say Command I, you could say /explain, and it's doing it here, but it's relevant to the code that it was talking about. So it's talking about the code expert Spock test is, yeah, it's pretty good. So it gives you a human readable explanation. So if you happen to be a new developer looking at some existing code and you want an explanation, now you can get a human readable explanation of Copilot Chat. Now let's go back to the maze solver and let's just ask it a question about that. We can say, is this code generated by AI? Okay, that's not actually true. This code was actually generated by ChatGPT, if I remember correctly. And so obviously this is probably checking whether it's code that it's generated in this project and not doing a kind of deep analysis of whether it's AI generated code or not. All right, so let's have a look at another example. Let's jump to our email validator. Now, again, this code was generated by ChatGPT, and I just want to ask some questions about it. So we can say, does the regular expression catch all of the edge cases addresses? So it's saying it's a common one, but may not catch all of the edge cases where the email address validation is a complex problem, blah, 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 blah. No one size fits all solution. So let's say, can you recommend any improvements? Okay, it's talking more about the code in general, not talking specifically about the regular expression. So let's see what it says. One way to allow for comments on white space and modify. Okay, it does modify the regular expression. So again, really helpful, really detailed, not just dumping out code, but explanations. And anytime you see some code, you can insert it directly into where your cursor is or create a new file from it. So it's really quite handy. And I want to go into all the kind of permutations of this. You can basically use it the same way that you use ChatGPT. So you can create an entire project, you can create front ends, CSS, HTML, create little applications, all that kind of stuff. The only main difference is that this is specialized and it's in your IDE and it won't answer questions that aren't programming related. All right, so let's try another example of where we might create a front end app. So let's try something quite basic. Create a HTML page with JavaScript embedded and CSS. Make it look good. Let's say CSS embedded. Make it look good. That is a calculator. Let's just try that. Looking good. All right, so let's put that into a new file. So let's say it's a new file. Yeah. And we can save that as calc. All right, and here we have it. So let's try. Wow. Yeah, and there you have it. So it's pretty simple. It's not exactly very beautiful. So let's see if we can just modify it slightly to make it a bit prettier. There you go, just like that. So let's copy this code. And I think we need to replace all of this. Okay, save that. Let's go to Safari. Okay, so it's made it 3D. It hasn't massively changed things. Let's say, okay, that's a pretty easy one. All right, but as you can see, we can even use it to create something like a calculator app, which is pretty good. If you were to do that by hand, it would at least take a little while to play about with. So for even something like a UI with some fiddly JavaScript and CSS, if you're a backend developer like me, it can always be a bit of a pain to do. And now you can do it very easily using CoPilot Chat. So what's behind CoPilot? CoPilot is powered by Codex from OpenAI, which is a descendant of GPT-3. That doesn't mean it's worse at coding than, say, ChatGPT using GPT-4, but they are a little bit different. Copilot is targeted specifically for programming, but ChatGPT is trained more broadly, so still might be a better choice to generate a starting point for your project. It may also be more aware of business scenarios and context around your project, but for day-to-day programming activities in your IDE, having the Copilot chat right there built into your IDE is pretty incredible, frictionless and seamless. So if you're going to use these types of tools, some combination of both probably be best. So to conclude my thoughts on Copilot Chat, I don't think it's here to replace developers, just like all the other AI tools that are out there. I can't talk about much further in the future. Things might change and things are changing constantly. But as of now, I don't think this poses any great immediate threat to software developers. I actually think it's a pretty good user experience. It's much closer to the code. It's much more focused experience than you get with, say, ChatGPT. And since it is more targeted, I suspect that there are many more optimizations that they could make to fine-tune this for more and more programming tasks, whereas ChatGPT, as you know, has a much wider remit. So all in all, I think it's a great tool and worth checking out. I'm interested to know whether you think it's worth the $100 a year price tag. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for watching.